The State of Crypto is presented by Tron, connecting the world to the power of cryptocurrency.
The U.S. Senate Banking Committee hosted a hearing called Crypto Crash: Why Financial System Safeguards Are Needed for Digital Assets on Tuesday. A prominent crypto critic, Chairman Sherrod Brown, hosted and led the hearing. We have more with CoinDesk Global Policy and Regulation Managing Editor Nick Day, who's also the editor of CoinDesk's The State of Crypto newsletter. Nick, so you were live tweeting this hearing. What was the mood of this meeting, and what were some of the key highlights?
Hey, good morning. So obviously, it's the first hearing held by the Senate Banking Committee this year, and the first held in the wake of, really all of the disasters last year. It was a pretty skeptical hearing, I would say. In some respects, it was a pretty, I think, typical hearing in that you had, obviously we had skepticism from the chairman, Senator Sherrod Brown. We had comments that were, almost defending the industry and really taking aim at SEC Chair Gary Gensler and other regulators from ranking member Senator Tim Scott. But there was also, a sense of, many of these questions we've been, that senators asked, we've heard about over the last several months. And the, real question now is what's next? Will the Senate act on the information from yesterday's hearing? Is this just a first step? And will there be other hearings before we start seeing actual legislation introduced? We don't have an answer to those questions at this point, but, at the very least, the conversation has gotten started again, and that's not nothing.
Nick, anything surprising at all come out of this hearing?
It's a good question. I would say not really. A lot of the senators who spoke asked questions along the lines of what you'd expect them to ask. Senator Elizabeth Warren has always been very suspicious and fairly critical of the crypto industry. She asked questions that were, kind of in line with those. Senator J.D. Vance, new senator who just took office last month, actually holds crypto and, acknowledged as such during the hearing, but said that he also recognizes there are downsides. They're really, I guess the most surprising thing is it was a pretty short hearing. Apparently they had to adjourn for votes, but so that meant we didn't hear from a lot of voices we might otherwise have expected to hear from, particularly, some of the more crypto-friendly senators. But the senators who did speak, we look at the questions that senators ask as kind of a indicator of what their mood is, of how they're approaching it. And yesterday it was really a lot of questions about, what are some of the risks? How can people better protect, consumers? And what could Congress actually do? And that's pretty much what we heard. And the answers were fairly typical.
So what was the real purpose of this hearing then? I mean, what's the end goal here?
A chance for Sherrod Brown to slam crypto.
Yeah, but I mean, why are we doing this? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, sure, there's some level of, hey, we want to be seen doing something, but for what it's worth, Senator Sherrod Brown has generally been, I think, fairly thoughtful on the industry, even though he has been skeptical, of course. He's been, for example, not as virulently anti-crypto as we've seen some other senators be. So, I think to some extent it definitely was a fact-finding mission. And the speakers today, or yesterday rather, were academics who have looked into this industry. We had a Professor Yesha Yada from Vanderbilt. She was, I think, the pro-crypto voice on the panel. We had Lee Rainers from the Duke Financial Economics Policy something. He was the very skeptical, and sort of in the middle we had visiting scholar at Georgetown, Linda Jiang, who is also part of the Crypto Council for Innovation. And so if you look back at the last hearing the Banking Committee held, those speakers were kind of more let's say famous, less academic, and so I think there was a sharp contrast. This does seem to have been more of a, what are some of the actual details we can look into kind of hearing.